The city woke like a giant stretching its limbs. White skyscrapers catching the morning sun, their glass gleaming like silver rivers. Market stalls sprawled beneath, buzzing with life, voices rising in song and argument, the scent of roasted maize and fresh fruit mingling in the heat of the streets. Children darted between the ankles of men in crisp suits, their laughter echoing alongside the honks of sleek cars weaving past humble shanties, where life followed its slow, traditional rhythm. This was a city of contrasts, where wealth and heritage danced uneasily together, and every glance told a story of desire, envy, or ambition. High above this tapestry of human life, the Mabula mansion stood like a fortress of pride and power, walls painted a flawless white, polished gates reflecting the rising sun. The gardens bloomed in careful symmetry, exotic flowers arranged in patterns that whispered order, control, and legacy. Here lived a family both revered and whispered about in hushed tones, their name carried in the mouths of merchants and ministers alike. They were kings of the city not by birth alone, but by fortune, influence, and a reputation that many envied and few questioned. Inside, Te Mabula moved through the halls with the grace of entitlement. His steps were measured, almost ceremonial, as though each footfall announced a universe that he belonged to a world of perfection, where consequences were shadows he could never see. He wore the confidence of a man born on a pedestal, a tailored suit hugging his frame, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The house smelled faintly of sandalwood and leather, a mix of wealth and sophistication. But beneath it lingered something unspoken, the pressure of tradition and expectation wrapped tightly around his family name. Te's mother, Mrs. Mabula, watched him from the staircase, her eyes sharp like a hawk's, measuring, calculating. "You walk as if the world owes you," she said softly, her voice slicing through the quiet. "But remember, a kingdom can fall on the arrogance of a prince." Te smiled, brushing the remark aside like dust. "Mother, the world is mine to command," he replied, voice smooth, confident, yet carrying no understanding of the storm her words hinted at. Downstairs, servants moved with silent precision, attending to the whims of the household. Glances stolen toward Te's every movement. Even they felt the tension, the invisible threads of judgment that wove through the air. Outside, the city waited, unaware that its sparkling streets and crowded marketplaces would soon bear witness to an event that would shake the foundations of the Mabula name. The marketplaces below, where tradition thrived alongside the hum of modern life, told a story all their own. Elders sat in shaded corners, fanning themselves slowly, whispering about the young heir in the mansion above. "The boy has arrogance stitched into his very bones," murmured one, voice hoarse with age. "One day, his pride will stumble, and the world will teach him lessons money cannot buy." Children playing nearby paused to listen, wide-eyed, absorbing the warning as though it were a fable passed down from the gods themselves. And Te, oblivious of the murmurs, the eyes that watched, and the lessons the city whispered, prepared for a night that promised glitter, laughter, and the kind of indulgence only the wealthy can afford. A gathering was planned, a celebration of power and influence, where the Mabula name would shine, where their fortune would sparkle like stars fallen to earth. Yet even in the midst of his laughter and jokes, there lay the seeds of conflict, subtle glances from rivals, silent warnings in the eyes of those who knew that wealth alone could not shield one from folly or consequence. As the sun climbed higher, lighting the city in its brilliant gold, Te's world seemed perfect, untouchable. But the streets below and the whispers of tradition carried a truth he could not yet see, that pride untempered by wisdom is a dangerous companion. And even kings and princes can be humbled when the lessons of the elders are ignored. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the moment when arrogance would meet reality, and when the balance between tradition and modernity would tip in ways that could never be undone. The contrast of the city, the sparkling towers and humble market stalls, the gleaming mansion and the roots of heritage entwined with concrete streets, was not just a backdrop but a reflection of the story that was about to unfold. Te's privilege was a light shining brightly, but shadows loomed, filled with whispers of judgment, envy, and the reckoning of consequences. Within the walls of the Mabula mansion, laughter mixed with caution, and the heartbeat of a young man unaware of the forces around him echoed in the halls, carrying with it the promise of drama, betrayal, and lessons that only life itself could teach. Outside, the city continued its daily rhythm, Ignorant of the storm rising within its heart. But soon, the wealth and laughter Tay's world would collide with the realities of human pride, and the tale that began amidst the white towers and bustling streets would carve its lessons deeply into the fabric of the city and its people. The stage was set, the players in place, and African fate, with its mix of tradition, morality, and justice, waited patiently to reveal its truths. In the heart of the city, where white towers reached for the clouds and bustling marketplaces thrummed with life, the Mabula mansion rose like a beacon of wealth and legacy. Its walls shone with immaculate white paint, reflecting the morning sun in dazzling splendor. The gates, forged of polished metal, opened onto gardens that were more than decoration. They were a decoration of power. Exotic flowers bloomed in carefully planned patterns, their colors vibrant yet contained, echoing the order, control, and influence of the family that lived within. Inside, the Mabulas moved with the poise of those born to command. Mrs. Mabula, regal and precise, oversaw every detail of the household, from the placement of silverware to the arrangement of the servants' duties. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, never missed a detail, and she carried the weight of her family's reputation with quiet authority. "Remember, Tay," she said one morning as her son strutted past her, "our name is a crown. It is not worn lightly, and it bends only under wisdom, not folly." Tay Mabula laughed softly, brushing aside her words like leaves in the wind. "Mother," he replied, voice confident, almost playful, "the world follows those who shine, not those who whisper warnings." He strode across the marble floors, the echo of his polished shoes a reminder of privilege and power. In his mind, wealth and influence made him untouchable, and he could not yet see the cracks forming beneath the glittering surface. The city beyond the mansion was alive, a stage of contrasts. Skyscrapers shimmered with mirrored glass, while traditional markets hummed with the pulse of generations. Street vendors called out their wares. Children ran barefoot through alleys, and elders observed, fanning themselves slowly as they whispered tales of caution. "Even the tallest tree falls when its roots are weak," one elder muttered to a companion, voice heavy with warning. The words were carried on the wind, unheard by Tay, yet they marked the invisible threads of fate weaving around the Mabula family. At breakfast, Tay sat at the long mahogany table, the sunlight glinting off crystal glasses filled with juice and wine, unaware of the silent scrutiny that filled the room. Servants moved gracefully around him, attending to every whim, while his parents watched with a mixture of pride and careful calculation. "Remember, my son," Mr. Mabula said, his tone deep and deliberate, "our fortune is more than money. It is respect, trust, and the way we are seen by others. One misstep can undo generations." Tay nodded absently, his thoughts elsewhere, imagining the evening gala, the luxury, and the attention he would command. The mansion itself seemed to hum with anticipation. Every room, every polished surface, whispered the family's legacy of the privileges and expectations wrapped around the Mabula name. Servants and staff moved like shadows, unseen yet essential, their loyalty tested by the whims of wealth and pride. Outside, the city pulsed with life, reflecting the same duality, modernity and tradition intertwined, rich and humble coexisting in a delicate balance. Tay's arrogance was a cloak he wore proudly, but the city's undercurrents hinted at consequences. In the alleys below, neighbors and shopkeepers exchanged glances, their words soft yet filled with judgment. "That boy has learned only privilege, never humility," one whispered. "The world has its own way of teaching lessons, and no wealth can shield the foolish." Even the children, running through the sunlit streets, paused briefly, sensing the invisible weight of the Mabula legacy pressing down from above. As the day progressed, preparations for the evening gala began. Chandeliers sparkled in the grand hall, polished floors gleamed, and tables were set with crystal and silver that caught the fading light like captured stars. Tay moved among the preparations confident, oblivious to the glances exchanged by staff and guests alike. His world was one of expectation and indulgence, yet in every whispered word, in every cautious look, the seeds of tension and moral reckoning were sown. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Taxis honked, vendors called, and markets thrived. The contrast between the Mabula mansion and the streets below mirrored the story that was about to unfold, one of arrogance and privilege, lessons in humility and consequence, and a timeless dance between wealth, wisdom, and morality. Tay believed himself untouchable, yet African fate, steeped in tradition and the judgment of elders, had already begun to write the first lines of his lesson. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the mansion's pristine walls. Within, laughter mingled with whispered warnings, and the city itself seemed to pause, as though aware that the events of the evening would ripple far beyond the polished floors and white gates. The story of the Mabula legacy, of Tay's pride, and of the invisible laws of honor, respect, and consequence was only beginning. And in this city of contrasts, where tradition met modernity, the drama of human folly and moral reckoning was poised to unfold in ways that no wealth or privilege could escape. The sun rose over the city, casting long shadows across the gleaming white mansions and the bustling streets below. Skyscrapers caught the first light, reflecting it in golden streaks, while marketplaces hummed with life, their vendors calling out wares, children darting between stalls, and elders watching quietly from the edges, their eyes sharp with knowing. This city was a place of contrasts, wealth and poverty, tradition and modernity, respect and envy, and in its heart, the Mabula mansion stood like a beacon, gleaming with pride and opulence. Inside the Mabula home, the air was thick with order and expectation. Mrs. Mabula moved through grand halls with quiet precision, her eyes taking in every detail, every polished surface reflecting not just wealth, but legacy. "Tay!" she called softly, her voice carrying the weight of generations. "Do not forget, our family name is a crown. It is worn with wisdom, not arrogance." Tay, lounging in a chair that felt more like a throne than furniture, smirked and flicked his gaze toward her. "Mother," he said with practiced ease, "the world follows the bold. I am only doing what comes naturally." He leaned back, sunlight glinting off his watch and cufflinks, unaware that his every move was observed by more than just his parents. The servants moved quietly, shadows in the background, carrying trays of breakfast and crystal glasses filled with juice and wine. Their faces, respectful yet wary, hinted at the lessons learned from years of seeing the Mabula sun grow unchecked. Mr. Mabula, seated at the head of the table, cleared his throat. "Tay, privilege is a tool, not a shield. You must learn to wield it with care, or it will betray you." But Tay's eyes were distant, focused on the evening gala in his mind, an event where the city's elite would bow, and his name would be whispered with awe. "I understand, Father," he replied lightly, though understanding had yet to touch his heart. The city beyond the gates pulsed with life, a rhythm both chaotic and beautiful. Street vendors called their wares, bicycles rattled through narrow lanes, and the voices of the elders rose and fell, carrying warnings disguised as conversation. "A crown is heavy," one murmured to another, "and a boy who knows only play will stumble when the time comes to walk in wisdom." Their words, soft as whispers on the wind, with invisible threads weaving a story that Tay could not yet see. Tay rose from his chair, moving through the house with an air of entitlement, his every step echoing across polished marble floors. The mansion's halls reflected not just light, but expectation. Each portrait on the wall, each ornate vase, spoke of a lineage steeped in power and influence. Yet beneath the grandeur, there was a tension, subtle but unmistakable, a warning that even the most gilded lives are fragile when arrogance guides a hand. He wandered to the balcony overlooking the city, the wind teasing his hair, and he let his eyes drift over the streets below. The white mansions, the gleaming roads, the bustling markets, all belonged to the world his family had built. But Tay, in his youth and inexperience, saw only opportunity, never consequence. A group of street children paused as they noticed him above, their small voices echoing with laughter and chatter, a reminder that life existed beyond the walls of privilege. He barely noticed them, but in African tales, it is often the smallest witness who sees the truth first. At breakfast, laughter and conversation flowed, but beneath the surface, currents of tension moved like hidden rivers. The servants exchanged glances, the walls themselves seemed to hold secrets, and outside, the city whispered of envy and judgment. Tay's arrogance was both shield and blindfold. Every command he gave, every jest he made, carried the weight of untested power, unaware that a single misstep could unravel more than just an evening's decorum. It could challenge the very foundation of the Mabula legacy. As the day progressed, preparations for the gala began in earnest. Crystal chandeliers sparkled under the careful hands of the staff. Tables were set with silver and porcelain that caught the light in shimmering patterns, and the mansion itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. Tay moved among the preparations, charming the staff with smiles and flattery, yet the elders who had trained him in lessons of respect and humility remained silent observers, knowing that African fate often chooses a moment when the proudest soul will be humbled. The city outside continued its dance of contrasts. Taxis honked, markets bustled, and traditional music floated from open windows, mingling with the scent of roasted maize and fresh flowers. Tay's world, filled with privilege and self-assuredness, existed within this larger city of lessons and consequences, where wealth could not shield a man from truth. The Mabula mansion, gleaming in white splendor, was both fortress and stage, a place where character would soon be tested, arrogance confronted, and legacy questioned. Even as Tay laughed and moved through the halls with his usual confidence, there were whispers in the corners, subtle glances exchanged between staff and guests alike. "The boy knows not yet the weight of honor," one elder whispered. "He will learn, and when he does, it may be too late to turn back." African tales often remind us that pride is a fragile companion, and even the strongest walls cannot contain the lessons that fate and human wisdom are ready to teach. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the white facade of the mansion. The city seemed to hold its breath, and the events of the night, the wine, the confrontation, the judgment, loomed like a storm on the horizon. Tay's arrogance had carried him far, but the balance of pride and humility, of wealth and wisdom, was about to be tested in ways that would ripple far beyond polished floors and gilded halls. The story of Tay, the spoiled son of the Mabulas, was poised at the edge of consequence, a tale of lessons woven from the rich traditions of African storytelling, where every action, every glance, and every choice carries the weight of legacy and morality. The Mabula mansion gleamed under the morning sun, its white walls shining like a jewel amidst the bustling modern city. Golden gates swung open to reveal a courtyard paved with polished stone, where exotic cars, black, silver, and deep red, were lined like soldiers awaiting inspection. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the faint aroma of roasted coffee from the kitchen, carrying through open balconies to where servants moved silently, attending to every need. This was a world of excess and elegance, yet beneath the surface, the air carried subtle tension, the kind only years of power and influence could cultivate. Inside the mansion, crystal chandeliers caught the light and scattered it across polished marble floors. Mirrors reflected opulence, and portraits of ancestors glared down with stern, unyielding eyes, reminding every Mabula of the weight of legacy. Tay lounged on a cream-colored sofa, phone in hand, scrolling through images of last night's gala. The laughter, the applause, the toasts. It had been a night of triumph in his mind, a celebration of his charm and the family's influence. Yet he remained unaware of the invisible eyes that watched and judged. "Mother, the event was perfect," Tay said, stretching his arms, golden bracelet catching the sunlight. "Everyone was impressed. They will speak of us for weeks." His tone carried arrogance and confidence, words spoken like a young lion claiming its pride. Mrs. Mabula, tall and regal, approached, her heels clicking softly against the marble. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, settled on Tay with a mixture of pride and concern. "Tay," she said slowly, "remember that admiration without respect is hollow. Do you understand what I mean?" Tay shrugged, flashing a careless grin. "Of course, Mother. Everyone admires me because I deserve it. That is natural." "Natural?" Mrs. Mabula's gaze lingered, searching for the humility that had yet to grow in her son's heart. Wealth had insulated him from consequence, teaching him to expect praise without effort and respect without wisdom. Her husband, Mr. Mabula, entered from the study, his tailored suit impeccable, his presence commanding attention. "Tay," he said, voice firm but measured, "your charm is a tool, not a gift without boundaries. Remember that legacy is not built on appearances alone." Tay nodded lightly, already turning away, his mind on the night's upcoming festivities. "Yes, Father. "I understand," he said, but his tone was light, unconcerned, like a breeze brushing past a lion's paw, without weight, without real consequence. Outside, the city throbbed with life. Skyscrapers rose like ivory towers, their glass facades reflecting the golden sun. Street vendors called out their wares. Children darted through narrow alleys, and elders leaned on walking sticks, observing with eyes that had seen generations rise and fall. In the marketplaces, colors clashed with the white grandeur of the Mabula neighborhood. Vivid fabrics, baskets of produce, and the hum of daily life reminding all that wealth alone did not define the city. It was a tapestry of tradition and modernity intertwined. Tay wandered through the mansion, passing the kitchen where the chefs prepared intricate dishes for the evening banquet. Platters of exotic fruits, delicately spiced meats, and glasses filled with sparkling wine gleamed under the soft light. Every detail was designed to impress, to maintain the family's image of perfection. Yet, even in the midst of luxury, subtle cracks were forming. Staff exchanged furtive glances, whispers barely audible. "The boy is careless. He will learn one day." He strolled out to the veranda, exotic cars parked below like soldiers awaiting orders. His eyes caught the reflection of the city skyline in the polished chrome of a vehicle. The bustling streets, filled with both modest dwellings and towering apartments, reminded him of a world he could not fully comprehend. Yet he felt invincible, believing wealth was a shield against life lessons. Mrs. Mabula appeared beside him, her expression unreadable. "Tay, remember this," she said softly. "Every action is observed. Every word carries weight. Pride without wisdom leads to ruin." Tay smiled, brushing off her caution, as one brushes away a mosquito. "I know, Mother, but tonight, everyone will see what I am capable of. They will remember the Mabula name through me." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the gleaming white mansion and the city beyond. The air, perfumed with wealth and expectation, carried the unspoken tension of impending lessons. African tales remind us that even the most gilded life is vulnerable when arrogance blinds a heart. Tay, caught between privilege and consequence, moved through his world with ease, unaware that the events to come, the wine, the confrontation, the judgment, would test not just his pride, but the very foundation of his family's legacy. Every servant, every observer, every elder in the city whispered in anticipation. The story of Tay's gilded lifestyle was only beginning, a tale woven with the richness of African tradition, where wealth and beauty mask character, where arrogance invites challenge, and where the moral compass must be found before pride leads to downfall. The Mabula mansion, though adorned with sleek modern architecture and gleaming white walls, held whispers of an ancient past. In quiet corners of the sprawling estate, carved wooden masks hung on walls, their painted faces telling stories older than the city itself. Tapestries, rich with the colors of the earth, ochre, deep brown, and crimson, draped hallways, each depicting scenes of ancestral valor and wisdom. Amidst the shimmering glass, steel, and marble, the echoes of tradition lingered, a reminder that the Mabula's wealth was not merely measured in gold and luxury cars, but in the responsibility to honor the generations that came before. Tay strolled through the great hall, his sneakers squeaking faintly against polished floors. He barely noticed the masks, the tapestries, or the hushed reverence that seemed to cling to the air. To him, these were mere decorations, curiosities of a past he felt removed from. "It's just old stories," he muttered to himself, glancing at a stern-faced elder mask. "What do they matter when we have everything?" Yet the mansion itself seemed to breathe, each hallway and chamber whispering warnings only the wise could hear. The wind through the open windows carried faint sounds of drums from the city below, echoes of ceremonies Tay had never attended, of rituals his ancestors had performed to guide families and communities through trials. Modernity could not erase these echoes. They persisted in the silent nods of the servants, the measured steps of his parents, and the faint, almost imperceptible thrum of ancestral presence that vibrated through the floors beneath him. Mrs. Mabula appeared at the foot of the staircase, her robe flowing like liquid silk. Her eyes, sharp and aware, caught Tay's disregard. "Tay," she said, voice soft but edged with authority, "do you not feel the weight of those who came before us? Wealth without wisdom is empty, and pride without understanding is dangerous." Tay looked down briefly, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Mother, these are just stories. I live in the world that matters. Our world, our wealth, our influence." "Stories, yes," she said, stepping closer, the sunlight catching the gold embroidery on her sleeve. "But they are more than tales. They are warnings, lessons, and reminders. The masks you dismiss have seen men rise and fall. They have watched pride turn sons into strangers to their families." Her gaze hardened. "Do not forget that legacy is not built in the moment. It is carved by respect for those who came before and by humility to those who will come after." Tay laughed lightly, brushing past her, heading to the balcony where the city sprawled endlessly. The skyline shimmered with glass towers and bustling markets, the hum of commerce blending with the distant beat of drums, the laughter of street vendors, and the call of elders teaching lessons in quiet courtyards. He inhaled deeply, trying to absorb the energy of modern life, the pulse of wealth and opportunity, while dismissing the subtle warnings embedded in the architecture and the ancestral artifacts around him. Yet, even as he reveled in the grandeur, there was a sense that the mansion itself was a bridge between worlds, between the present and the past, between indulgence and discipline, between arrogance and the humility demanded by tradition. Each echo of a ceremonial drum, each carved face on the wall, seemed to watch him, waiting to see if he would honor the wisdom embedded in their silent vigilance. In the study, Mr. Mabula reviewed documents for the evening gala, the faint rustle of papers echoing through the hall. He paused, sensing the tension between his son and the ancestral weight pressing quietly from the walls. "Tay!" he called, not raising his voice, but firm enough to halt his son's carefree steps. "You walk through these halls as though the past has no bearing on you. But remember, what is ignored is never gone. Pride will meet consequence, and the lessons of our ancestors are patient, yet unyielding." Tay's smile wavered for a moment, just a flicker, like sunlight passing behind a cloud. He looked at the masks again, at the tapestries, and for a heartbeat, the story behind them seemed alive. The victories, the sacrifices, the warnings of fathers, mothers, and elders who had walked similar paths. But the fleeting thought was drowned in the certainty of youth and wealth. "I am untouchable," he whispered to himself. "Nothing can reach me here." Outside, the city thrummed with life. Between luxury towers and traditional markets, children played, elders argued softly, merchants shouted prices, and music drifted from open windows. The contrast of modernity and heritage reminded all who passed that Africa's soul was woven with layers, each generation both a continuation and a challenge to the last. In this tapestry, Tay moved like a young lion, unaware that even lions could be ensnared by unseen traps, and that wealth, no matter how gilded, could never shield him from the moral test his ancestors had long foretold. Even as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the mansion's white walls, the ancestral echoes whispered to the halls. Pride can blind, arrogance invites judgment, and every action carries a ripple that may one day return to teach humility. Tay, immersed in opulence yet untouched by wisdom, had not yet realized that this gilded existence, luxury, influence, admiration, would soon face a challenge that no amount of wealth could smooth over. The drums of tradition, subtle but relentless, continued to echo, a warning and a promise. In African tales, no son is beyond the reach of the lessons hidden in masks, woven into tapestries, and carried silently by the walls of those who came before. And tonight, those lessons would begin their slow, deliberate work. The Mabula mansion stood like a white sentinel in the heart of the city, a gleaming testament to wealth, power, and influence. Its high walls and golden gates reflected sunlight, blinding to outsiders. Yet inside, every corridor, staircase, and room whispered stories older than the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Beyond the gates, the streets thrummed with life. A mix of traditional markets selling spices and fabrics, honking modern cars, and children darting between skyscrapers and small homes. In this city of contrasts, the Mabula's presence was both admired and envied, their wealth impossible to ignore. Tay moved through the grand hallways with the arrogance of youth accustomed to privilege. He laughed loudly, tossing his designer bag over his shoulder, while servants hurried quietly behind him, their eyes darting to catch any hint of displeasure. Outside the windows, Neighbors pause in their routines. Glances exchange, murmurs of judgment almost audible to those attuned. "There he goes again," whispered Merchant to his companion, eyes narrowing at the young man striding past in his crisp suit, the boy who thinks wealth shields him from the world's gaze. But Tay noticed none of it. In his mind, the world was a playground, and he the sovereign of this small kingdom of marble, gold, and glass. "What are they looking at?" he said aloud, smirking at his reflection in the polished floor. "Do they think they can reach me here?" Yet society's gaze is a patient watcher. Across the street, the children of the neighborhood pointed discreetly, and the elders shook heads knowingly. Even the staff of the mansion exchanged subtle looks, aware that privilege often masks folly, and that arrogance could invite the consequences of generations before. One housekeeper, whispering to another, said softly, "They grow up thinking they own the world, but the world has its own ways of teaching humility." In the living room, Mrs. Mabler arranged flowers in a crystal vase. She paused as Tay's laughter echoed through the halls, feeling the tension that always lingered in the spaces between wealth and wisdom. "Tay!" she called, not loudly, but with the authority that demanded attention. "Remember, people are always watching, even when they seem silent. The world measures us not just by our wealth, but by the respect we show to others and the humility we carry within." Tay rolled his eyes, tossing a casual glance at her. "Mother, they watch, yes, but wealth gives freedom. Freedom to act, to live without fear." Mrs. Mabler's eyes, sharp as hawks, softened briefly, then hardened. Freedom without responsibility is like a drum without rhythm, loud, chaotic, and destined to falter. Do not forget the lessons hidden in these halls. Our ancestors built this family not merely with gold, but with honor, respect, and foresight. One misstep, Tay, and all that you believed shield you could crumble. Tay ignored the words and headed to the balcony overlooking the city. From here, he could see the blend of past and present. Towering skyscrapers next to humble markets, luxury cars weaving past donkeys laden with goods, young girls in uniforms laughing while elders sat in shade, watching. The city was alive, vibrant, and unforgiving. Yet Tay saw it only as a backdrop to his own importance. And yet, even as he reveled in his perceived dominance, subtle signals reached him from all directions. A shopkeeper's narrowed eyes, a neighbor's whispered comments, the servant's barely concealed sighs. Each glance, each whisper, a tiny thread of caution from a world that weighed consequences more heavily than coins. Tay's privilege had shielded him so far, but the threads of society's judgment were woven into the air he breathed, impossible to escape. Later, at the edge of the mansion's garden, Tay encountered a group of young men his age, their gazes curious yet cautious. "You think you can walk through the city untouched?" one asked slyly. "Even your wealth cannot hide you from the eyes that see truth." Tay laughed, a sound filled with certainty and naivety. "Truth? I define my truth. Let them watch, let them whisper. Nothing reaches me here." Yet, as he turned away, the wind carried a faint echo, a drumbeat, a whisper from the ancestors, a reminder that privilege without humility is a fragile shield. Even the mansion, with its gilded gates and marble floors, seemed to hum a warning. Society watches, ancestors observe, and pride invites reckoning. The sun began to dip behind the white towers and golden gates, casting long shadows that stretched across the polished courtyard. The whispers and glances of neighbors, the subtle judgments of strangers, and the quiet vigilance of those who serve the household all wove together into a tapestry of tension. Tay, confident and untouched, was unknowingly standing on the edge of a test he could not yet see, the test of morality, consequence, and the inescapable gaze of society that honors wisdom as much as wealth. In that moment, the contrast of the city, the opulence of his life against the enduring presence of tradition, observation, and communal judgment, formed a silent warning. For in African tales, no child of privilege moves without consequence, and even the strongest walls cannot shield a young man from the eyes of the world, or the lessons whispered by those who came before. The night approached, and with it, the weight of societal expectation and ancestral legacy. Tay's laughter faded into the shadows of the mansion, leaving a faint echo that reminded all who listened. In a city where tradition and modernity collide, Privilege is always watched, and arrogance can invite both judgment and fate. The city glistened under the afternoon sun, a modern African jewel where glass towers reflected the sky. White mansions lined streets of polished stone, and bustling markets overflowed with the colors, smells, and sounds of life rooted in tradition. Here, the modern clashed gently yet insistently with the ancestral. A car horn interrupted the laughter of children playing under the shade of a baobab tree, while elders watched from doorways, their faces etched with stories of a past that demanded respect. Among this rhythm of contrasts, the Mabula mansion rose like a fortress of wealth, its gates golden, its walls pristine, each window a mirror reflecting the city's admiration and envy alike. Inside, Tay moved through the halls as though the house itself had been built for him alone. His laughter echoed against the marble floors, a sound brimming with certainty and carelessness. Designers' labels clung to his every step. Servants hurried to anticipate his whims. Yet, in every glance exchanged by the staff, in every murmured word between neighbors peering through iron gates, there lay a subtle warning. Tay's privilege, dazzling as it was, did not shield him from the currents of judgment flowing around the mansion's walls. "There he goes again," whispered one elder across the street, the sun casting long shadows that seemed to bow in respect for wisdom older than the city itself. "The boy who walks as if the world owes him life." Tay paid no mind. His reflection in the tall mirrors of the corridor smiled back with arrogance. "Let them watch," he said aloud, voice carrying through the halls, bold and unthinking. "Nothing here can touch me. Nothing outside these walls matters." His words, meant to affirm dominance, floated in the air and met the silent eyes of ancestral masks lining the walls. The masks, gifts from elders long gone, watched with the quiet judgment of generations who knew that pride often precedes a fall. Yet the world, even a city of luxury and glass, has its way of testing those unprepared for consequence. As Tay stepped onto the balcony overlooking the streets, he noticed the subtle movements of the city. Market women signaling to each other, young men watching with a mixture of curiosity and caution, and children pointing discreetly, laughing at the flamboyance that surrounded him. Whispers rose and fell like the wind, carrying cautionary tales that Tay, in his arrogance, could not yet hear. "They do not see wealth as protection," one shopkeeper murmured to another. "It is but a mask. Watch closely, and the world will teach him." In the kitchen, Mrs. Mabula paused from arranging fruit and polished silver. She sensed the winds of misfortune stirring around her son, subtle and insistent. "Tay," she called, her voice steady yet layered with warning. "You move with confidence, yes, but remember, the eyes of the world are many and its memory long. Even a mansion as tall as ours cannot shield from folly." Tay waved her off, a careless grin on his lips. "Mother, I know my world. These walls, this wealth, it is all mine. No glance, no whisper, no judgment can reach me here." But the ancient rhythm of the city would not allow arrogance to remain untested. Outside, a gathering of peers and neighbors, silently observing, marked the subtle shift in air around him. Even the servants, who had long mastered the art of invisibility, exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Privilege, they knew, was a fragile armor, and every bubble of excess carries within the potential for rupture. As he strode toward the driveway, his latest purchase, a sleek black luxury car, waiting like a black stallion at the gates, Tay felt invincible. The golden sunlight kissed the polished curves of the vehicle, and he imagined the world bending to his will. Yet behind those walls of steel and glass, hidden lessons stirred. The ancestral spirits lingered, and the murmurs of tradition whispered from every corner. A warning that every action carries weight, that the reckless and unthinking invite forces far beyond their understanding. A servant approached hesitantly, carrying a tray of refreshments meant for Tay's afternoon entertainment. He bowed slightly, voice soft. "Sir, perhaps a moment to consider before you step out?" Tay snorted, brushing aside caution. "I consider nothing when the world bows before me. Let the city speak its whispers. I walk untouched." Yet, as he opened the car door, the wind carried more than air. It carried the distant rhythms of ancestral drums, a subtle reminder that in African tales no act, however small, exists in isolation. A single careless step, a single thoughtless gesture, can awaken forces older and wiser than youth and wealth combined. The city's blend of modernity and tradition, of wealth and moral expectation, wrapped around him like a net he could not yet see, preparing to test a boy who believed himself untouchable. The sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across the white gates, the polished stone and the gleaming black car. And in that interplay of light and shadow, Tay's world, brilliant and untested, began to tremble under the quiet gaze of society and the whispered wisdom of ancestors. The mansion, the city, the streets, all waited, patient and knowing, for the first crack in privilege to appear. For in the heart of African storytelling, pride is never without consequence, and no fortune, no matter how vast, can shield a child from the lessons life and history insists upon teaching. The modern African cities stretch before the sun, like a living mosaic of ambition and tradition. Towering skyscrapers kiss the clouds, their glass reflecting the hustle below, while gleaming white mansions stood like silent sentinels along tree-lined avenues. Yet in the shadow of these monuments to wealth, the heart of the city pulsed with age-old rhythm. Market stalls overflowed with woven baskets. Spices perfumed the air, and children raced through narrow alleys, their laughter echoing like a song of memory. Here, wealth and roots coexisted, and the lessons of the ancestors whispered in every stone and wind-swept corner. At the center of the city of contrast stood the Mabula Mansion, a palace of gold gates, polished marble, and imported luxuries that reflected the family's power and influence. Within its walls, servants moved like shadows, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Exotic cars lined the driveway, their engines humming like predators awaiting release. Grand parties illuminated the mansion's halls at night, laughter mingling with the clinking of crystal glasses. Yet beneath the shimmer lay subtle cracks in character, hints of pride untempered by wisdom. Tay Mabula, the heir to this world of opulence, moved through the mansion as though it were his kingdom. His steps echoed against the marble floors, his laugh loud and confident. He wore arrogance as effortlessly as the tailored suits draped over his shoulders. "Where are the attendants?" he called, voice slicing through the echoing hall. "And the imported wine, yes, the finest from France. Bring it at once." His mother, Mrs. Mabula, stood by the staircase, her arms folded. Her gaze was calm but firm, lined with the quiet knowledge of generations. "Tay, remember that this wealth does not make you untouchable," she said, her voice steady. "Power without respect is fragile, and pride untempered by humility invites danger." Tay waved her words aside, a careless grin lighting his face. "Mother, the city bends for me. Let the neighbors whisper. Let the merchants watch. None can reach me. I am the Mabula boy, and this world belongs to my footsteps alone." Yet even as he spoke, the mansion seemed alive with whispers. Masks and ancestral carvings lined the walls, their silent presence a reminder of wisdom older than the city. The family's traditions had not been erased by modernity. They lingered, watching, waiting. Every corridor and polished surface carried the echoes of lessons not yet learned. Outside, the city itself seemed to respond to Tay's arrogance. Market vendors leaned closer to their wares, exchanging glances. Elders paused mid-step, murmuring quietly to one another. Children stopped their play, eyes wide as they followed the polished car down the driveway. Pride walks today, an elder whispered, and the wind carries a warning. Tay ignored them all, stepping into the sleek black car that gleamed like a dark jewel. The engine roared to life, and with a flourish of confidence, he drove onto the wide streets lined with both gleaming towers and traditional homes. The city hummed with energy, honest labor, whispered gossip, and the constant rhythm of lives intertwined in unseen ways. It was a stage where every glance and word carried weight, yet Tay's eyes were blind to consequence. His friend and distant cousin, Amari, followed on foot, his steps measured. "Tay," he called cautious, "the city watches more than you realize. Whispers follow the bold, and judgment lies hidden in every gaze. Even wealth cannot shield you from the lessons life will teach." Tay laughed, loud and careless, shaking his head. "Amari, you worry too much. I am protected by blood and gold. Let the city murmur. It is nothing. Let the winds blow. I shall not falter." But the city's energy shifted subtly. Market voices, the laughter of children, the nods of servants and neighbors, all formed a tapestry of quiet warning. The streets, vibrant and alive, carried the invisible weight of ancestral knowledge, reminding that arrogance unchecked draws unseen consequences. Tay's privilege had shielded him until now. But the first careless act, the single moment of thoughtless pride, could awaken forces beyond his understanding. Inside the mansion, Mrs. Mabula murmured prayers for her son, invoking ancestral protection. Ancestors, guide him, teach him the weight of pride and the cost of entitlement. Let him learn, though he does not yet see. The wooden masts above her head seemed to lean closer, silent sentinels of morality, guardians of lessons long forgotten by the young heir. As Tay's car disappeared into the streets, the city shimmered with duality. Wealth and humility, modernity and tradition, vanity and wisdom. Every shadow, every glance, every whispered word suggested a future shaped by choices yet to be made. In this modern African city, life's hidden lessons waited patiently, and the threads of consequence began to weave themselves quietly around the boy who believed he was untouchable. Even amid gold gates, luxury cars, and grand parties, the ancient rhythms of morality, respect, and ancestral guidance thrummed softly, unseen yet inexorable. The stage was set, the city alive with possibility, and the Mabula heir's story of reckoning had quietly begun.